used to not believe in coming back. Not after the nights I spent staring at the ceiling, begging for sleep like a desperate man clinging to sanity. Everyone says, just relax, you'll fall asleep eventually. But what do they know? They've never heard the sound of their thoughts echo in the silence at 3 a.m. My battle with anxiety and depression had already hollowed me out, but it was the insomnia that truly broke me. Night after night I'd lie there, eyes wide open, heart racing, thoughts spiraling. The more I craved sleep, the further it slipped away. And the irony? It wasn't caffeine or a new bed or even my phone. It was something much deeper. Something no one warns you about, the war within. In those endless hours of quiet torment, I discovered a dark truth. When you want sleep too badly, you'll never find it. The very act of wanting becomes your prison. I had to learn a truth many overlook. Healing doesn't come from fighting harder. It comes from surrendering better. You see, sleep is one of those rare things in life you can't force. You can't chase it. The more you obsess, the more it slips through your fingers. And like someone drowning in quicksand, I had to stop struggling in order to rise, but it took time. It took mistakes. It took tears. And it took something I never thought I'd find again. Patience. This is not just a story about sleepless nights. It's a story about control, obsession, surrender, and ultimately, freedom. It's about how I stopped chasing sleep and started listening to what my body and soul were trying to tell me all along. This is how insomnia didn't ruin me. It woke me up. The worst thing about insomnia isn't just the lack of sleep. It's the constant mental warfare that takes over your life. It starts in the morning. You wake up tired, frustrated, and already fearful about the night ahead. By lunchtime, the anxiety begins to build. What if tonight is another disaster? Whispers the voice in your head. By evening, it's screaming. You try to prepare. You light candles. You make chamomile tea. You stretch and do breathing exercises. You avoid screens. You lower the lights. Everything you do is focused on achieving one goal, to finally fall asleep. But sleep doesn't come. And each failed attempt adds fuel to the fire. That was my everyday. I transformed my entire life around the fear of insomnia. My room was perfectly curated to encourage sleep. Lavender scent diffusers, blackout curtains, white noise machines. But none of it worked. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding, my thoughts racing. The more effort I put in, the worse it became. I was trapped in what I now call the insomnia performance spiral. Every night became a performance where failure was guaranteed. I had turned sleep into a task, a mission, and I was failing it night after night. One day, while doom scrolling through sleep forums, I stumbled across a single sentence that stopped me cold. Craving is the root of suffering. It was a Buddhist principle, something I had heard before but never truly understood. This time it clicked. I had turned sleep into a craving. I was clinging to it like a drowning man clings to air, and that clinging was destroying me. The more I obsessed over sleep, the more I suffered. I wasn't just tired, I was terrified. I had convinced myself that if I didn't sleep, something horrible would happen. I would lose my mind, I would ruin my health, I would collapse. That belief was what needed to change first. Not my pillows, not my supplements, my beliefs. So I began to challenge those thoughts. Every time I found myself spiraling, what if I never sleep again? I paused and asked, has that ever happened? Have I really gone without sleep forever? Or have I always found some way to get through the night? The answer, of course, was that I had survived every sleepless night before. Maybe groggy, maybe frustrated, but I had survived, and I could survive again. So I created a mantra, something simple, something human. It's just insomnia. I've had it before, I'll have it again, and I'll be okay. I would repeat this every time the fear crept in. At first it felt forced, but over time it grounded me. It reminded me that insomnia was not a monster. It was just a part of the human experience. A difficult part, yes, but not the end of the world. And that shift, from fear to acceptance, was my first real step toward healing. It didn't fix everything overnight. I still had rough nights. I still felt the old panic return from time to time. But that rope of self-compassion, that simple statement, kept me from falling as far. Eventually, I stopped treating insomnia like a threat. I started seeing it as a messenger, a symptom of something deeper: stress, unresolved emotions, trauma, unmet needs. Sleep wasn't the problem. It was the alarm. The illusion of control had convinced me that if I just did everything right, I would be rewarded with rest. But that was never true. Healing came not from perfecting the ritual, but from releasing the grip. Insomnia taught me that some things in life can't be fixed by effort. Some things only heal when we let go, and so that's what I began to do. One of the most pivotal shifts in my healing came not from a supplement or a doctor, but from a single moment of surrender. It was 2:47 a.m. I was lying in bed, heart racing, stomach tight, eyes wide open. I had already tried deep breathing. I had already read a few pages of a book. Nothing was working. And in that still agonizing moment, I caught myself whispering, "Please, please just let me sleep." But then, a different voice inside of me quietly asked, "What if you stopped begging? What if you just let yourself be?" It was strange. That voice felt calm, wise even, like a part of me I hadn't heard from in years. So I stopped. I stopped trying. I let go of the need to fall asleep and simply laid there with my breath. I started to observe what was really going on, the sensations in my body, the stories spinning in my mind, and instead of labeling everything as bad, I simply said, "This is what it's like to be awake right now." That tiny shift from resistance to observation created space. I began using those long nights as a mirror. What was my mind so afraid of? What pain was still lingering inside me? Why did I believe that being awake meant something was wrong? Insomnia stopped being a punishment. It became an invitation to slow down, to turn inward, to meet the parts of me that only surfaced when the world was quiet. I started journaling during these hours, not out of desperation, but out of curiosity. I wrote down everything, my fears, my regrets, my hopes, and in doing so, I realized I had been carrying so much unspoken emotion. My sleeplessness wasn't the root problem. It was the smoke. The fire was emotional overload. The stillness of the night became a sacred space, a place where I didn't have to pretend I was okay. I could be tired, I could be scared, I could be human. Soon I noticed something beautiful. The less I resisted being awake, the less it hurt. The anxiety didn't grip me as tightly. My thoughts still came, but I could watch them float by instead of being dragged under. And then, without even trying, I started to doze off more often. Not every night, but often enough to know something was shifting. I realized that sleep, like peace, can't be forced. It arises in the absence of inner conflict. So I kept practicing. Some nights I'd fall asleep easily. Other nights I wouldn't. But I stopped measuring my self-worth by my sleep hours. I stopped treating each night as a test. I gave myself permission to just be. One night I caught myself smiling in the dark. I wasn't asleep, but I wasn't suffering either. And in that moment I knew I was healing. That night became a turning point. Not because I suddenly cured my insomnia, but because I was no longer a victim of it. I was an observer, a participant in my own process. From then on, I began crafting my evenings differently. I didn't aim to wind down perfectly or avoid every trigger. I simply chose activities that made me feel calm and safe. A warm shower, a few pages from a novel, a soft instrumental playlist, and I practiced kindness. When the anxiety crept in, I didn't fight it. I greeted it like an old friend. "Oh, hey, you again. You must be here for a reason." What are you trying to tell me? This compassionate inner dialogue became my medicine. Not pills, not hacks, not control, but presence. And slowly, my nights transformed. They weren't just about sleep anymore. They became about reconnection with myself, with my breath, with my truth. I had stopped fearing the night, and that made all the difference. To be continued. There came a moment in my journey where I no longer wanted to fight. I was tired of rituals, tired of resistance, tired of turning sleep into a nightly performance I kept failing. Something had to shift, and finally it did. Not because I tried harder, but because I tried less. The realization came one morning after yet another restless night, but instead of beating myself up or obsessively Googling new techniques, I simply got up, stretched, made a cup of tea and whispered to myself, "It's okay, I'm still here." That was the beginning of something new. I began approaching insomnia not as an enemy to be defeated but as a signal, one asking me to pay attention. I let go of the need to fix it overnight. I let go of the fear that every bad night would ruin me. And I let go of the pressure to be someone who always sleeps well. In other words, I dropped the fight. You see, there's a difference between giving up and letting go. Giving up is rooted in despair. Letting go is rooted in trust. I wasn't giving up on sleep. I was giving up on control. Instead of trying to force sleep, I focused on creating peace. Not the peace that comes from silence or perfect circumstances, but the kind that comes from acceptance. So, I stopped checking the clock every 10 minutes. I stopped calculating how many hours I had left until morning. I stopped reading articles about sleep hygiene at 3 a.m. I gave myself permission to stop caring so much. And that, strangely enough, is when things began to change. Sleep started to come back, little by little. A few hours here, a nap there. Not because I earned it, but because I created space for it to return. The nights became softer. Some were still restless, sure, but I no longer spiraled. I no longer fell into the mental trap of, "This means something is wrong with me." Instead, I treated it like weather. Some nights are stormy, some are calm, but none last forever. I started practicing something I called neutral presence. On nights when I couldn't sleep, I simply existed. I allowed myself to feel tired without dramatizing it. I watched my thoughts without chasing them. I listened to my breath. I let my body be. Sometimes I lay awake and stared at the ceiling. Sometimes I read a few comforting pages of an old favorite book. Other times, I simply whispered to myself, "Tonight is what it is, and that's okay." And on those nights, something magical happened. I felt peace, even without sleep. Eventually, my nervous system got the message. There was no threat here. No punishment for being awake. No danger in having a restless night. The less I reacted, the less my body panicked. And the less it panicked, the more rest could return naturally. Sleep stopped being something I chased and started being something I allowed. I also changed my language. Instead of saying, "I suffer from insomnia," I began saying, "Sometimes I stay up late with my thoughts." That reframing took the edge off. It softened the identity I had wrapped myself in. I was no longer a broken sleeper. I was a human being having a temporary experience. I began extending that same grace to others. I stopped judging people for their sleep habits. I stopped glorifying hustle culture. I stopped seeing rest as something to earn. And in doing so, I stepped into a more compassionate way of living. I started noticing how much tension I carried throughout the day. Not just at night. My jaw was often tight, my breath was shallow, my shoulders were up by my ears, so I started releasing it. During the day, not just before bed. I walked more slowly. I ate more mindfully. I built in pockets of rest into my afternoons. I started creating a life that didn't demand sleep as an escape but welcomed it as a part of a rhythm. I even redefined what success meant for me. Success wasn't a perfect 8-hour sleep tracked on an app. It was waking up and meeting myself with kindness no matter how tired I felt. Letting go of the fight changed everything. It brought me back to myself. It reminded me that I am not my sleep patterns. I am not my anxiety. I am not my worst nights. I am the one who walks through them. And that makes me strong. Healing didn't come wrapped in a perfect bedtime routine or the latest sleep hack. It came wrapped in surrender. It came when I finally said enough, not out of defeat, but out of love. And the nights, those long, quiet, painful nights, became something else entirely. They became proof that I could sit with discomfort, that I could hold space for my fear without letting it control me, that I could be present, even when things weren't perfect, that I could rest, even without sleep. And in that rest, sleep finally found me again. To be continued. When I stopped fighting insomnia and began trusting my body, I realized something profound. I couldn't heal through mindset alone. Acceptance gave me peace, but routine gave me rhythm. The body, like the mind, craves signals, rituals that say it's safe now, you can rest. So I began to rebuild my nights from the ground up. Not to force sleep, but to care for myself. My goal wasn't 8 hours. It was presence, kindness, a return to my natural rhythm. I started simple. A short walk after dinner, nothing intense, just movement. Feeling the air on my face, letting my thoughts wander gently without purpose. Then I'd return home and dim the lights, cueing my body that we were entering the calm zone. I replaced doom scrolling with journaling. I didn't write anything profound, just whatever was in my head. Some nights it was anger. Some nights it was gratitude. Some nights I wrote, I don't know what I feel. And that was okay. I took warm showers before bed, letting the water wash away the weight of the day. I wasn't trying to relax perfectly, I was just making space, inviting stillness instead of demanding it. And the most surprising thing? These small acts started to add up. I wasn't always falling asleep fast, but I was no longer afraid of bedtime. That was a win in itself. I learned to pause during the day too, to take 5 minutes and breathe, to notice tension in my shoulders and consciously release it, to walk slower, to speak more gently. My nervous system wasn't just activated at night, it had been in overdrive all day. So I made rest a daily practice. Not just something I did at night, but a way I lived. I started treating rest not as a reward, but as a right. The media often tells us that poor sleep will ruin our health, that every sleepless night takes years off our life. And while sleep is important, I began to question that fear. I met people who hadn't slept well in years, but they were resilient, joyful, and thriving. I realized that fear was often more harmful than fatigue. I reminded myself, the human body is incredibly adaptive. It knows how to survive even with disrupted sleep. I stopped catastrophizing. I told myself, even if tonight is rough, I'll still find moments of energy tomorrow. I'll still be okay. On nights I couldn't sleep, I had backup plans. I'd read something light, or I'd do a body scan meditation, or I'd whisper affirmations to myself. I am safe. This will pass. I even found new meaning in those hours. I stopped calling it the insomnia window and started calling it the quiet hour. Sometimes it became the only moment in the day where I truly listened to myself. And with time, my sleep improved. Not because I forced it, but because I created a life that no longer feared the night. One of the most powerful shifts came when I stopped asking, how do I fix my sleep? And started asking, how do I care for myself even when I don't sleep? That question brought me deeper than any supplement or sleep hack ever could. I began practicing gentle cognitive behavioral therapy, CBTI. I tracked my sleep not to analyze it obsessively, but to notice patterns with curiosity. I noticed that on days filled with chaos and stress, my nights reflected that noise. But on days where I slowed down, said no to overcommitments, and created space for rest, my nights followed suit. CBT taught me that thoughts like, "I'll go crazy if I don't sleep," are distortions, not facts. I challenged them. Will I really go crazy? Or have I just had a bad night and need a little grace? That reframing gave me power, but perhaps the greatest lesson I learned was this. I don't need perfect sleep to live a meaningful life. I need presence, compassion, and a willingness to keep showing up for myself. Insomnia no longer defines me, but it shaped me. It taught me how to build routines not out of fear, but out of love. My bedtime routine now isn't about trying harder. It's about offering myself softness at the end of the day. It's how I say, I've done enough, I am enough, and now I rest. To be continued. Looking back, I no longer see those sleepless nights as wasted hours. I see them as quiet teachers, ones I never asked for, but desperately needed. They stripped away every illusion I had about control, perfection, and what it meant to be okay. They humbled me, and in that humility I found peace. Insomnia didn't just test my patience, it tested my identity. For so long I saw rest as a measure of my worth. If I couldn't sleep, I believed I was failing. But slowly, those long nights taught me the opposite. My worth was never tied to how well I slept. It was tied to how gently I could meet myself in moments of struggle. The truth is, healing isn't about eliminating every symptom. It's about changing the way we respond to them. It's about meeting anxiety with curiosity instead of panic. Meeting exhaustion with grace instead of guilt. Meeting ourselves with love instead of criticism. I still have difficult nights. I still have anxious thoughts. But now, I hold them differently. I don't spiral. I don't cling. I don't make them mean something catastrophic. I let them pass, through me, like weather. And eventually, they do. What I've come to understand is this. Insomnia didn't ruin my life. It revealed the parts of me that needed the most care. It gave me space to slow down. It forced me to listen to my body. It reminded me that rest is more than sleep. It's a relationship with ourselves. So if you're struggling right now, I hope you hear this. You are not broken. You are not alone. And you don't need to be fixed. You need to be met exactly as you are with softness and truth. Sleep will come, not as a prize for your effort, but as a byproduct of your trust. It won't always be perfect, but it will be enough. You will be enough. And as you begin to release the fight, you might find something unexpected waiting for you in the quiet. A new kind of awakening. A deeper connection to yourself. A peace that doesn't depend on the outcome of the night. In the next chapter, I'll share the surprising way this journey led me to my first spiritual awakening, an experience born not from light, but from the deepest darkness. Because sometimes it's the silence of the night that finally lets us hear the voice within. Stay with me. The story is just beginning.